guys, we're going to resume.
So I'm Ryan. I'm going to talk about Vue.js, and specifically I'm going to talk about components in Vue.js using ES6 and sort of the enhanced tooling that Vue presents for components with Webpack. So there's this really cool thing called Vue CLI. If you've ever heard of Create React App, it's sort of a thing that bootstraps creating a little application or an actual application with this tooling. So just like Create React App, Vue CLI does the same kind of thing. So I used this recently to make kind of this cool thing for my office. So I have a JavaScript error. If only I had track.js. Oh, look at that. So that's why you don't npm install stuff, right? Okay, well, that's too bad. You can just see the live one. That's cool, too. So we have a bunch of these TVs in my office, and they were just sitting there doing nothing. So what I did is I made this little dashboard kind of thing, and what we can do here is we can say who's in the office, who's busy, who's gone. So we can say, this kind of stuff, and then we can just go back to the main screen, and they can see who's in and who's out. It's a nice little thing. It's really cool. One of the cooler parts of it, though, is that we actually have it hooked up to WebSockets. So if we click on Catherine here and we update her, we can just have it move just automatically. And so that's not anything to do with Vue, but it's kind of cool. So what is really useful about Vue is that on this page, there's a bunch of components. So these components are pretty much the same. The only thing that changes is the data. And that data can mutate classes, it can mutate state, it can mutate which endpoint to hit for various pieces of functionality. So we're just going to briefly walk through that. So most of this starts with Vue CLI. You just do like Vue CLI init, whatever your project name is. We named our project Kitty Hawk, just for fun. So the first file you probably see is this. Is it big enough for everybody? You'll probably see this main.js file, and it's just your standard imports. It's like importing React. I'm using a router, so it's Vue router. Then I'm importing the app component. So to bootstrap the whole application, we just pass in this template. We're telling it that we're targeting the app ID, and we're giving it the component of app. So that all gets pushed into this very minimalistic Java HTML template, and you can see that actually that app div is right there, and that turns into this file. Now this is kind of weird. So normally if you're using Angular or if you're using React, you'll usually see either one file with a bunch of weird JavaScript HTML or 1,000 files, maybe with some HTML, maybe with some JavaScript, maybe with some directives. So this is Vue's specialty build tool component, which is these .vue files. So instead of having all of your code with JSX or in a bunch of different files next to each other, they decided to make it so that you could have templates, scripts, and styles all in one file. So at the top of the file, we can see the template, which is just our top navigation, and then where we render views. Then the script part here renders the top navigation. Nothing very exciting. We just register the app name. We tell it which component to use. And then down here, we're just importing some baseline styles through Bootstrap or whatever CSS framework we're using. The components in Vue are really simple. So it's basically HTML with a few extra directive-like things. So you can see here that we have this special one, router link. So router link turns into just an anchor tag once it's been parsed and rendered. But internally, you can add these special things like to, so that the router knows to bring you to the landing page. And then we also have @click. So Vue has really simple events, so you can attach event listeners to clicks, double clicks, whatever you like. And then you can execute arbitrary code inside, so display menu equals the inverse of display menu. And then down here, we can toggle classes on and off. So this JavaScript object has isActive, and then it's either present or not present based on whatever the state of display menu is. So then in the script section, you can see that we have data. Data returns just a plain JavaScript object with one key display menu. It's initially set to false. And so then in the browser, this is of course only available on mobile, so then you can see that the display menu can toggle on and off. That's great. So that's cool, but we need, where does all the stuff actually happen on that screen? Where are all those components? So I'm using Vue router, and Vue router lets you hook up routes just like in Angular, just like React router, and the syntax is probably pretty similar. So we can name routes, we can give them a path, and then we attach them to a component to render inside of the router view. So we're going to be looking at people view first, since that's where most of the action happens. So this is the people view. So the template for this is super simple. There's one component in it. It's just the people grid. But you'll notice that we're binding people to people. That seems kind of weird, but it's really simple. So the code for this seems kind of long and kind of annoying, but it's mostly just boilerplate. So we just name it, we tell it what components we're using, we have a mixin for using the socket.js so that we get those nice push updates. You can see that here that we have a method called getPeople that just calls an AJAX call to our server to get the people, and then you can see here that we're binding whatever we got from the response to this component's local copy of people. So if we scroll down a bit, we can see that data returns just a plain JavaScript object of people. It's initially set to null, and that's important. We'll see why in a moment. And then you can see when we create the component for the first time, each time it's rendered, it will tell the socket whenever it's been refreshed, get the people, but for the first time also get the people. So in the grid view component, the single component that's inside of the people view, this is where the cool stuff starts happening. So we have this first thing here called the transition group. And so one of the things that JavaScript used to be famous for was JavaScript animations. Now everybody likes CSS transitions and CSS animations. So we needed a useful way to interact with those through JavaScript, even though it's CSS. So I don't know the exact magic behind the transition groups, but it lets you do that cool flying animation stuff whenever you do the updates. You'll notice that we have a directive on it called vif. So if people is truthy, it renders. If it's not, it goes down here to the velse, and that renders instead. So we also have here this v4. So for each person in people, render a person card from that array. You'll notice that we bind a person to a person again, same kind of stuff. Person card brings us to this. So this is where the actual little cards on this UI actually exist. So this has some simple bindings, so it's sort of like mustache bindings really, squiggly brackets, person.name, get the name, render it there. We can actually execute functions whenever we do rendering. So this is showing the relative time since the last update, and this is really cool. So it's sort of like a computed function, but in line. So whenever person.lastUpdated actually changes, the template gets re-rendered, and this function gets called. We also have a class binding here. So instead of using an array an object literal, we can actually have just a string return to actually act as the class directly. And then we have another VF here to display the message or not. So the code for this is really simple. I'm using Moment, great time management library. So you can see here that we have our get status class. It's very simple, just returns a string based on the status that was passed in. We have get last updated duration. So this just returns this nice updated 9 minutes ago kind of text. And then we have this function here, update last updated display. that gets called in the set interval. So all of these components are really easy to reuse. So we have all of these components over here. So I have also the person view. And so the person view makes use of the same person card. It takes in the same data, but what's neat about it is you can attach classes on the outside too, so that the card inside can get rendered differently. So if we scroll to the person card again, we have one of the cool things in Vue is you can tell it to use different CSS pre-processing libraries if you want. So I'm using Sass here. So the person card has some styles, but then I also have the large format styles for the singular display setup. And we can just attach that anytime we need to. So Vue makes using these components really easy. It keeps the code for the three major parts of a component, the CSS, the script, the HTML, all in one nice little place. And so this whole thing to put together for the first time, excluding actually like doing the socket stuff, probably took about 2 days, because Vue CLI made the initial Webpack setup effortless. We didn't have to tinker with Webpack at all, which is a pain usually. And just integrating all the little components together was really easy because it's really natural to pass data around like this. Any questions?
Cool. Can you compare this framework to, say, AngularJS, Angular 1?
Yeah, definitely. So Angular is sort of like this big monolith kind of thing. So it has controllers, it has models, it has services, it has factories, it has everything you could ever want. Vue is just a, data binding library really. You can add a router, you can add a state management library if you want. It's a lot lighter than Angular. You'd have to do a lot less work to get this to work than Angular. Sort of the same with Angular 2. That said, if you're making a gigantic, like enterprise scale app, you might not pick Vue because you don't get a service container, you don't get services. You just sort of have to make those on your own.
Do you know if it has any interop Vue with the native web components specification?
I think there's been some work towards it, but because the specification has been in such limbo lately, they haven't really done too much about it. I know that the guy who made Vue has looked into it and talked about it in one of the talks he's done, so I know it's on their mind. Any other questions?
Do you use a compiler for the CSS, or what do you use for?
Yeah. So it's using Webpack to compile the whole bundle, and so anything that Webpack has, a plugin for, you can use. So you can use Sass. You can use, I guess you could use less if you wanted to. Why? Yeah. So you can use anything you want. You just have to have a plugin that Webpack can accept, like a Webpack loader. Great. Thank you.